Want to reclaim your personal data, protecting you from identity thefts, hacks, or worse? Then try Incogni and get a 60% discount on an annual subscription when you use offer code SKILLUP at incogni.com/skillup. Click below to get started or stick around to the end of the video to learn more.
Ashes of Creation. This is, of course, the MMORPG that began its life as a Kickstarter campaign nearly 9 years ago, boasting entirely player-run settlements and conflicts, quest choices and natural disasters that have lasting impacts on the world, a multi-class system, and more. It managed to crowdfund over $3.2 million US, and while I was not among one of those backers, as an MMO fan, I have been loosely following the project in the years since, and I was keen to get hands-on for myself when it was, albeit quite suddenly, dropped into early access on Steam at the end of last year. So here's the thing, I was not expecting much from this. I thought the Kickstarter campaign was overly ambitious. I thought the supporter packs charging $100+ for alpha access or whatever were super lame. Every dev livestream seemed to scope creep the game further, and everything I'd heard from alpha testers seemed to indicate that this early access launch was going to be a complete disaster. But look, after playing 20 hours of it, I'll say that I actually like this game. I do. But even though I like this, I just cannot bring myself to play much more of it. Like, despite not having even gotten to experience the quote-unquote best parts of this game, like the dungeons, naval exploration, and territory PvP stuff, I have found a lot to like here. Fundamental aspects like the combat and class design are great. I enjoy most parts of its novel crafting and trading loop, and crucially, I like the amount of genuine player interaction and cooperation that this game encourages. That's something that's unfortunately rare in MMOs these days. It's been lost to time in the pursuit of sanding back friction. And while there's certainly good reasons for that, we've kind of come to this full circle moment now where people like myself want to play an MMO every now and then that brings back some of that friction, and in turn brings back that social aspect that once defined the MMO genre. And that is something that Ashes of Creation really has going for it. Between its dangerous world, its crafting and trading systems, its open PvP and territory control, this game wants you to talk to other people and play with other people. I think that's fantastic, and that alone is enough of a reason for me to want this game to go the distance. But as I said, I cannot bring myself to play any more of it, because while there is that good kind of friction that creates interesting stories, at the moment there's also a lot, and I mean a lot, of what I would call bad friction. Things that just don't serve the game in any way. All that great stuff I mentioned runs in parallel to an excruciatingly dry leveling experience. What you might have heard is true. There aren't enough quests in the game to even get you a fraction of the way to max level, and so leveling is mostly relegated to farming mobs, something that you're asked to do for up to 100+ hours if you want to reach the point where you can properly engage with, presumably, the more interesting parts of the game, like dungeons, naval trade, and PvP. There's the server tech, which granted does make the world feel alive, but it also massively bogs down performance and actually makes the leveling experience even more painful owing to this game's approach to loot and XP share. And while I do generally like the non-combat game loop centered around crafting and trade, particularly in how it plays around risk versus reward, that fine balance right now is totally off kilter, as the time that these systems require of you is too great and the risk of it all being for naught is too high, because of player griefing being almost indirectly encouraged by the game right now. And just to be clear, in case it isn't already, I have no problem with friction in an MMO. On the contrary, I rather like it. It's a big part of why I enjoy old school MMOs like WoW Classic and Guild Wars 1, and even enjoy the hardcore permadeath modes. When the stakes are high and the game's pace is reined in, you're encouraged to take your time to learn every system, every ability, and every reward, no matter how seemingly small, tastes all the sweeter. No pain, no gain, as they say. But Ashes of Creation right now simply has too much pain and not enough gain. And so while I do want to keep playing this game, I can't see myself jumping back in anytime soon. I'll start this review by addressing one of the more common narratives around Ashes of Creation, this idea that it's a straight-up scam. But a scam, this is not. Intrepid Studio have been very transparent throughout development about what this game is, who it's for, what the early access release contains. Are they overly ambitious about what's to come in the future? Absolutely. Were the expensive FOMO supporter packs pretty scummy? Absolutely. But I do not believe that they are trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. I do, however, think this studio has been so focused on on their grand ambitions that they've lost sight of an important piece of the MMO package, the leveling experience. In character creation, for example, you're given a choice between 2 starting areas, each of which offer 2 different introductory quest lines. So that's cool, I thought, until I later came to find out that currently there aren't enough quests in the game to even get you halfway to the current max level of 25. You kind of just stop getting any after level 8 or so, and that's if you pick the more developed zone. I feel like a basic quest line that guides you to max level is kind of the bare minimum for an MMO, and should have been the higher priority than having a bunch of different starting areas. Furthermore, once you're done with that opening quest chain, there isn't much actual bespoke content to make up that leveling journey. There are events that can pop up, but they don't give that much XP, and they're also very simple, often just having you clear waves of enemies that spawn in from nowhere. There does appear to be some form of dungeons in the game, but they are few and far between, and even after 20 hours, I was still a while off from entering those. And from what I understand, they're also not worth doing anyway, since other methods of leveling and gearing are far more effective. Leveling up then is mostly relegated to doing town commissions, which are just basic cycling quests like collecting materials or killing mobs, but by far the most effective leveling method is mob grinding. Now, as someone who grew up on MapleStory, I appreciate the nostalgia this brings, but not only is it the most, dare I say, low effort game loop you could settle for in the year of our Lord 2026, it's also got all these extra points of friction here in Ashes of Creation. So there are no separate server instances or shards or whatever you want to call them. All players on a server exist on the same layer. That's nice in theory, it makes the world feel really alive, particularly in towns. But they've spent all this time building this proprietary server tech without accounting for how it might impact performance, because yeah, it leads to this crazy character pop-in and hitching going on constantly, which I can only imagine is a nightmare to deal with in large-scale PvP. But when it comes to the leveling experience, you can also imagine how annoying this is when combined with the decision to not share loot or XP from mobs that were tagged by another player first, unless you're in a party with them. Not only does this make completing certain quest objectives super annoying, like no joke, I spent probably like 2 hours straight on top of this church here, just burning down the same handful of mobs trying to complete this one quest. This also means that it's almost impossible to grind mobs solo, since all the best grinding spots are filled with other players, as you can see here. So you're then encouraged to join a party for the highest chance at tagging mobs, and for other reasons too. You get an added XP bonus when in a group, and to grind efficiently, you often need to be in a full Holy Trinity setup with a tank, healer, and DPS. And you know what? I don't mind that. As I'll talk about later, I think it's cool that this game encourages grouping up, but not when it's crucial for something as monotonous as mob grinding, and not when that mob grinding is basically your only option for leveling, unless you're okay to gimp yourself by leveling much slower through those commission quest things. And by the way, it's not like you're grinding one spot for like an hour or two. XP gain is so painfully slow that you're often asked to spend like 10 plus hours just farming the same little area against the same mobs until you reach the next level bracket and do it all over again somewhere else. And that's setting aside the time it takes to get into groups if you're a DPS player, since everyone's playing DPS and there aren't enough tanks and healers to make up groups. The only thing then that helps alleviate the monotony of the grind is the combat and class design, which I'll admit is surprisingly solid. I'm an easy mark for this combat since it's very similar to my MMO of choice, Guild Wars 2. It's this hybrid of action and tab target combat where most attacks will home in on your selected enemy, but a number of your abilities are aimed skill shots, and there's even an action camera toggle if you want your camera tied to your mouse. When it comes to the classes, you've got 8 archetypes to pick from, categorized into tank, support, and DPS roles. Multi-classing hasn't made it into the game yet, and to be honest, I have my doubts about if it ever will, given the work required to create and balance 64 different playstyles, but what's here so far is great. I played an archer mostly, and despite having trouble getting into groups sometimes as a DPS, I enjoyed my time leveling with it. Each point in the skill tree felt meaningful, giving me a new active ability or modifying an existing ability to lean into various builds. So for example, I chose abilities and augments that let me apply bleeding, and combined that with other abilities that could convert that bleeding into a higher damage debuff. It's quite easy to intuit how these abilities synergize with each other, and not for nothing, but they also look pretty cool. The only thing that holds the combat back, I think, are the enemies. They move at inconsistent speeds, they'll clip through walls and objects, and their telegraphs and movesets are very unclear, so even though you've got a dodge roll and a parry, it's difficult to tell when you're actually supposed to be using those. The only explanation for why enemy design and questing are so undercooked after so many years of development is because the leveling experience simply wasn't a priority. Instead, Intrepid Studio have thrown all their weight behind the endgame, where there are more interesting activities like raids, dungeons, territory wars, and naval combat, and for what it's worth, that stuff does look quite fun from the videos I've seen, but they might as well not exist if most players aren't going to get there on account of such a mind-numbing leveling experience. So I think if Ashes of Creation stands any chance at going the distance, Intrepid are really going to have to prioritize that leveling experience ASAP. Thankfully, they've said they're already working on filling out that main quest line, but yeah, the fact that that still doesn't exist after all these years of development and testing is quite telling. I do think it's also a result of Intrepid being so intent on Ashes of Creation not becoming a theme park MMO that has you zipping between quest hubs and waiting for your dungeon or raid queue to pop while you jump around in circles in a main city. Like it or not, they've designed this game to be a sandbox MMO, where the focus is on players creating their own stories and encounters through the crafting, trade, and PvP systems. And while I'm really on board with the ideas presented here, the execution still has a ways to go. Intrepid Studios' founder, Stephen Shariff, was a big fan of an MMO called Arcade, an MMO that stood out for its PvP territory wars, its naval warfare and exploration, and its focus on trade, at least until it became jam-packed with pay-to-win nonsense. That's what Shariff wanted to solve. It seems to me that he basically just wanted to recreate Arcade without the pay-to-win stuff. I think that's an admirable goal, and big picture, I think that's exactly what he and his team had delivered here, even in this early access release. You can really see that in the progression system. So progression outside of leveling is also about gear, something that whether you're crafting or buying requires raw gold. There is no fast travel, there is no global auction house. Each town has its own trading post where players create their own shop tab to sell items. And with those limitations in place, one of the most effective ways to make money is by ferrying materials from one town to another. This can mean gaming the market by buying or harvesting materials in one town and selling them in another town where players are buying those materials for more. A more straightforward method though, and the more common one, is to craft these commodity crates, which you can sell off directly to a vendor in another town. The crate increases in sell price depending on the quality of the materials you packed it with, and how far away the town is from where you crafted it. So some may understandably find this quite dry, but as someone who is already well served by all the other MMOs that focus almost entirely on PvE combat, I found this emphasis on crafting and trade quite novel. I like the chill loop of harvesting and crafting goods that you donate to a town for the scripts required to make a crate, then gathering my finest materials to pack it with, and I like how all this work builds up the stakes for that final journey, since you're always at risk of losing your crate if you die to a hostile mob, or more likely, another player. Because yeah, something I haven't mentioned yet is that PvP is always a possibility in this game. At any point you can attack or be attacked by another player. There's an extra button input required so that it's hard to do accidentally, but yeah, the tension is always there, and that tension is what makes something as mundane as hauling cargo so much more exciting. It's almost akin to that of heading to an extraction point in Ark Raiders with a backpack full of valuable loot. Now, there are systems in place to punish griefing. If you kill someone, you become corrupted, which means you're freely killable by other players, and the more you do this, the more you raise the chance of dropping actual gear on death, where usually you only drop materials. It's a decent punishment, but there's a pretty simple loophole at the moment, where players just team up with a buddy, and after they kill a player and take their stuff, their buddy kills them, clearing the corruption, taking all the loot, and then dividing amongst themselves with no repercussions. And to be frank, I don't blame them. First of all, there's nowhere else for PvP players to go, really. There are no arenas, there are meant to be these open PvP zones, but they're not rewarding enough. You don't get better materials for winning balanced fights, as far as I'm aware. So if you want a PvP in this very PvP-centric game and make it worth your while, the best course of action is griefing lower level players, which obviously sucks massively for everyone. The game also indirectly encourages this behavior because
because all other methods of earning gold are so much more time consuming and high risk. Like I already spoke about crate running, where there are all these steps involved to craft a crate, and then there's the time spent hoofing it to another town, which can sometimes take up to an hour straight to be worth it. But even if you want to do something as simple as crafting and selling items in the same town, that requires spending time going out to gather materials, then refining those materials, which not only cost gold to do, but also requires waiting an unreasonable amount of time. Honestly, I have no idea why refining materials in this game takes so long. No joke, it took me almost an hour just to make a handful of blueberries. There's like a 10-minute wait to refine my wood into wood chips, then 20 minutes wait to turn my wood chips into mulch, then another 20 minutes to grow the blueberries, and after all that, you've got to pay a listing fee to put up your item in the store, and if it doesn't sell, well, bad luck. That's just more gold down the drain. So yeah, it's no surprise that players are looking to sidestep this stuff through PvP, but the result is that just 1 month later, the payout for those crates isn't quite worth the risk anymore, specifically if you're lower level or playing solo, and if you're both, Godspeed. It is rough out there, man. Like, as time passes, more people are reaching max level and catching on to just how much more effective it is to murk lower level players, which really destabilizes that risk versus reward balance that makes the trade loop so compelling. The one upside to all of this is how it fosters player interaction. It's much less risky to deliver crates alongside guildmates. Likewise, it's faster to craft things if guildmates send you the materials they don't need in exchange for stuff that you don't need. With that in mind, I did end up seeking a guild, and through their Discord, I've been able to keep up with all the other interesting player dynamics going on in the server. There are specific guilds we're allied with, ones we've been warned to watch out for, others we're specifically targeting because they've at some point killed guildmates. The guild organizes group crate runs and open ocean fishing expeditions, which all become much more enjoyable when you can banter along the way. And none of this is organized by the game. It's all just completely player run. I think that's pretty cool. And this social mindset results in cooperation even when it's not mutually beneficial. I recall the time I almost lost my crate to some high-level wolf that killed me just outside of town, if not for this absolute legend who guarded my crate until I could get back. I remember the time that I came upon this gathering of players mounted on wolves, and I asked how I could get one. Then they filled me in on the steps involved and sent me on my way with some free gear. It's bonding through shared adversity, basically. The slower pace and the high stakes incentivize these kinds of interactions in a way that you can rarely experience in most MMOs where much of that friction has been sanded back. But the caveat, of course, is that only the most engaged players will be privy to that stuff. And I think most people won't get to that point, given that the leveling experience, the crafting and trade systems, and the PvP feel so unfulfilling right now. That's the early access release of Ashes of Creation. I want to reiterate here that despite its myriad problems, there are things to like about this game. This isn't a scam, nor, to my surprise, an unmitigated disaster. The combat and classes are good, there are glimpses of a compelling game loop built around trade and territory control. I like the cooperation it encourages. I can definitely see the appeal of an MMO like this, one that relies on its players creating their own stories through its various systems, rather than content curated by the developers. I do think if you're into old school or sandbox MMOs, this game has the potential to someday serve you quite well. But that day is not today, at least for me. Setting aside all the expected caveats for an MMO still in its infancy, like rampant bugs and exploits, Ashes of Creation just asks for too much while giving back too little at the moment. It wants you to spend $50 for an MMO with barely any quests. It wants you to spend hours farming mobs in the same place, only to be rewarded with fancy abilities that you can use to farm even more mobs. It wants you to spend all this time putting together a supply crate and hoofing it to a town miles away, only to likely have it sniped from you by some max level player, and wants you to spend literal real world hours waiting around for even the most basic of materials to refine. And there are other reasons to be skeptical, of course. Like, let's not ignore the fact that MMOs are notoriously expensive to develop and maintain, and not only has Sharif himself stated that he's got over 250 full-time employees on his payroll, but that the studio spends over $800,000 per per week on operating expenses alone. So I do not know how they're funding this, but I have to imagine they're burning a lot of cash, and I do wonder how long they'll be able to keep this up for. Ever the optimist though, I do genuinely hope the best for Intrepid Studio. They've clearly given their all to this niche, old school inspired MMORPG. It's the kind of risky bet that few, if any, Western studios would dare to take these days. But it's one that's kind of needed right now, given the recent closure of New World, which was very similar in its design, and the fact that there's no other major MMOs coming out in the near future, given the string of in-development MMO cancellations, and major MMOs like Guild Wars 3 or the Riot MMO still likely being many, many years away. I applaud them for stepping up to the plate, and I do think that there's something here, but at the moment Ashes of Creation is just too painful to play, with a long road ahead of it before it fulfills that Kickstarter promise. So for now, I'll be watching on from the sidelines.
Let 2026 be the year that you invest in a safer online presence with this video sponsor, Incogni, who are specialists in helping you reclaim your online data in order to protect you from identity thefts, hacks, or worse. Removing your data from as many corners of the internet as you can may seem like a no-brainer, but it can be a relentless and exhausting process to try and bargain with companies to take your data down. That's where Incogni comes in. You sign up, you enter your details, you grant it the required permissions, and after that, Incogni does all the work for you, sending out hundreds of automated requests to reclaim your data. Incogni has sent out over 177 requests on my behalf, which has resulted in my data being taken down from 171 sites. 171. I had absolutely no idea that 171 sites even had my data. Now, thankfully, they don't, thanks to Incogni. If I was to have submitted all these requests myself, doing all the paperwork and back and forth, it would have taken me around 128 hours, making Incogni incredibly well priced given how much value it delivers. Also, since data can reappear on sites where it's already been taken down, Incogni will circle back and repeatedly remove it for you, saving you even more time and energy. Incogni doesn't stop there though. Have you ever searched yourself on Google? We've all done it, but the amount of personal information publicly available that surfaces when you do it is staggering and adds another layer of online vulnerability. Incogni offers a custom removal option where you can tell it to remove your personal data from specific entities that may not be included in Incogni's automated removal process. Some exclusions apply here, but it does give you more control over your personal data. It's super easy, super effective, and best of all, super affordable. You can use offer code SKILLUP at incogni.com/skillup to get 60% off an annual subscription. Take your personal data back and get a 60% discount while doing it by visiting incogni.com/skillup and using offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Thanks Incogni for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.